So far, I have uploaded 3 videos to this new channel exposing judicial corruption. One of them was a 6-hour-long video where I go unbelievably in-depth trying to expose just how corrupt the US government is. Now, some people may take a look at this video, in particular its length, and think that this video will be nothing but 6 solid hours of a paranoid lunatic rambling on about nothing. While I do not believe that that is what the video contains, I really have no way of truly proving that to you other than asking you to watch the video. But you're not likely to throw away 6 hours of your life when you're already convinced that I'm just a paranoid and delusional maniac. That is why I decided to start this new spin-off series. See, I do believe that I am a fair man. I believe that I am capable of seeing reason when the evidence is clearly on one side. Also, I am not going to accuse the government of being evil simply because it supports my pre-existing beliefs. I will defend the government when the evidence is clearly in their favor. That is what this series will be dedicated towards. In this series, I will take various conspiracy theories that many people believe, and I will debunk them 11 ways to Sunday. This series will not be dedicated to simply accusing the government of being corrupt. I already have a series on this channel dedicated to that. This will be dedicated to actually defending the government when they are wrongly accused. So, without further ado, let's begin episode 1 of Political Conspiracies Debunked. James OJ Simpson. His name is now synonymous with exploiting loopholes and technicalities to avoid punishment for the most heinous of crimes. He is the walking mascot, whether he likes it or not, for arguments that the criminal justice system is corrupt and inefficient. Clearly, OJ's defense team bribed the jury into acquitting him. How could they have not have been in the defense's pocket? He was acquitted of double murder in the first degree, despite DNA evidence linking him to the murders, simply because the glove didn't fit. Or was he? Oh, don't get me wrong. I do not deny for a minute that OJ was indeed acquitted of his double murder in 1995. That much is public record and therefore is beyond dispute. However, the urban legends that A, there was DNA evidence linking him to the crime, and B, his acquittal was based solely on the fact that the glove didn't fit, are just that, mere urban legends. These two things have been passed around for so many years now that they have unofficially become common knowledge. In other words, they are so widely accepted that many people do not consider it necessary to have any evidence to back it up when they say it themselves. To the contrary, archived news articles I was able to pull that document the trial while the trial was still ongoing tell a very different story. In fact, not only was there plenty of reasonable doubt as to OJ's guilt, but I would even go as far as to say that the evidence affirmatively exonerated him. In fact, after viewing all the evidence, I honestly consider it to be more of a conspiracy that OJ was held liable in civil court for the tort of wrongful death. So, exactly what evidence did I find? Well, let's begin. First, we must ask ourselves, What evidence did the prosecution have to prove that OJ was guilty of these two murders? After all, the defense is not required to introduce any evidence of his own. It is the prosecution who holds the burden of proof. All the defense has to do is debunk the prosecution's evidence. So, that requires we know what the evidence was. The trial went on for several months, so it would be impossible for me to list all the evidence that the prosecution offered. However, the biggest and best evidence that the prosecution had could be summed up as follows. There was matching DNA of OJ Simpson and his two victims appearing on multiple articles of clothing worn by Simpson and by his two victims, as well as located in Simpson's Bronco. Moreover, the several articles of clothing owned by the two victims were found in OJ's home, according to the testimony given by lead investigator Mark Furhman, almost as if he were keeping them as souvenirs. That was the lion's share of the prosecution's case. So if that evidence can be debunked, then we can safely say that there is reasonable doubt as to OJ Simpson's guilt. If we can debunk this evidence without ever once mentioning whether or not the glove fit his hand, then that stops this urban legend on a dime. So about the DNA evidence. Was there blood on the clothes, including the glove that may or may not have fit OJ's hand? Did this blood belong to OJ and or his ex-girlfriend and or her friend? The answer may shock you. The answer is, we honestly don't know. Although the prosecution reported the blood as a DNA match for these three parties, the problem there is that the margin of error was astronomically large. Andrea Mazzola was the police scientist who collected the vials of blood from the crime scene. However, by her own admission, the vials of blood were actually left in her lab coat pocket for an entire day before she handed the vials over to be properly preserved as evidence. That, ladies and gentlemen, changes everything. See, a common misconception is that DNA evidence is irrefutable. More importantly, a very common misconception is that DNA evidence is always irrefutable. When DNA evidence is a match, the odds of it being a false positive are considered to be 1 in 21 billion. However, that is assuming that the DNA is not tainted by exposure to the elements. For example, if a doctor is simply running a paternity test to see if you're the father of this girl's kid, he will likely take a blood sample from your elbow using a syringe. The blood will go straight from your body straight into a vial, without ever once coming into contact with the atmosphere. In that case, the DNA sample is kept pristine, and so the 1 in 21 billion margin of error remains intact. But if the blood is splattered all over a crime scene, then the police are racing against the clock, as the margin of error increases at a mind-boggling rate. In the case of OJ Simpson, keeping the vials of blood in her pocket for a whole day rendered the incriminating evidence effectively useless in making a definitive match. Okay, you're probably thinking, but what about the fact that the clothes were found in OJ's home? He was keeping these clothes as souvenirs for his crimes. How else could they have ended up in OJ's home if he wasn't the killer? Well, remember earlier when I said that the evidence not only presented reasonable doubt as to his guilt, but actually affirmatively exonerated him? Well, here we are. The blood contained in these articles of clothing showed clear evidence of anticoagulant. In other words, they had already been handled by California forensics experts while searching for a DNA match before they were found in O.J. Simpson's home. What? in the words of the defendant's star witness. There is absolutely no doubt that the sock that was soaked in blood was planted. Why? First of all, the blood had EDTA on it, a chemical that's an anticoagulant that is not found in the human body. It's only found in tubes. So we were able to prove that the police had poured blood from the test tubes onto the sock. So this begs the question, why? What motive would anyone have to frame OJ for murder? Well, remember earlier when I said that these articles of clothing were all found in OJ's home by lead investigator Mark Furhman? Well, as it turns out, OJ's defense team was able to dig up some serious dirt on Furhman. Namely, they found some footage of a taped interview he gave on the East Coast where Furhman used the N-word no fewer than 41 times. In fact, so outlandish was Furhman's racist outburst that the prosecution in OJ's case even admitted outright that Furhman was a racist piece of trash. Instead, he merely asked the jury to consider his testimony credible despite his clear racism, although he gave no good reason why they should. Of course, defending Furhman in the closing arguments of that case didn't stop the state of California from turning around after OJ was acquitted and charging Furhman with perjury for the testimony he gave in that case. Furhman would eventually plead no contest to that charge, and if you have even a rudimentary understanding of how the criminal justice system works, you know that means he was convicted. But what about that infamous sentence from the defense during closing arguments? Everyone knows the phrase. He says, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." Clearly, the defense is arguing that the glove not fitting is all the evidence they need to exonerate Mr. Simpson, right?
Wrong!
The defense attorney did indeed utter the line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." But what exactly does he mean by it? Is he talking about the glove? Or is he talking about something else? Well, here's the excerpt from the closing arguments where the defense attorney actually said this line. Let's see if you can figure out what it is when the attorney says, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit."
I was thinking last night about this case and their theory and how it didn't make any sense and how it didn't fit and how something is wrong. It occurred to me how they were going to come here and stand up here and tell you how OJ Simpson was going to disguise himself. He was going to put on a knit cap and some dark clothes, and he was going to get in his white Bronco and this recognizable person and go over and kill his wife. That's what they want you to believe. That's how silly their argument is. And I said to myself, maybe I can demonstrate this graphically. I'm going to show you something. This is a knit cap. I'm going to put this knit cap on. And you've been seeing me for a year. If I put this knit cap on, who am I? I'm still Johnny Cochran with a knit cap. And if you look at OJ Simpson over there, and he has a rather large head, OJ Simpson in a knit cap from 2 blocks away is still OJ Simpson. It's no disguise. It's no disguise. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Now, maybe I'm just a paranoid and delusional lunatic, but at least from my perspective, it seems like he's arguing that if the prosecution's evidence doesn't make any logical sense, then the jury's verdict should default to the party who is innocent until proven guilty. If he's talking about any articles of clothing at all, it appears to me that he's talking about a knit cap, not a glove. But hey, I made a 6-hour-long video where I tried to show how every aspect of government in this country is corrupt to the bone. So what do I know? So there you have it. OJ Simpson was not acquitted simply because the glove didn't fit. He was not acquitted because the jury was bribed into acquitting him. He was acquitted because there, honest to goodness, was no evidence definitively linking him to the murders. And in fact, evidence suggesting that he was actually framed. If OJ's wealth played a role in his acquittal, it was clearly because he hired a AAA legal defense team who was worth every penny, not simply because he paid the jury off. So that begs the question, why is the misconception so pervasive that he was exonerated simply because of jury corruption? Why is the misconception so pervasive that the only evidence he had in his defense that was actually on the record was that the glove didn't fit, when that's clearly not what actually happened? At this point, I am merely speculating. There simply is no definitive traceable origin for this misconception. The history simply isn't there. However, I have a theory that is at least a little bit consistent with the evidence we have. One means of coming up with a theory is to look at the reactions of the people in the immediate aftermath of the acquittal. Those interviewed immediately after hearing the verdict for the first time gave completely polarized opinions on the matter, ranging from complete disgust.
You know what? Johnny Cochran will be a rich guy. He will make a fortune. He will get lots of clients now, and I hope that he can sleep at night because he got a double murderer off his case. He's going to go home and feel happy. And what about his kids? How can he even look at his kids?
To disappointment. To rejoicing.
Jury in the above entitled action find the defendant or involving Simpson not guilty of it.
On a side note, I find it rather telling that the opinions about the verdict in the immediate aftermath appear to be divided almost entirely across racial lines. But again, what do I know? But aside from that, the bottom line is that nobody even mentions the unfitting glove, let alone suggests that this was the only thing the defense had to counter the prosecution's mountain of evidence. So perhaps these people, upset over what they considered to be a travesty of justice, came up with some excuse to try and justify it in their own minds. Of course, they didn't do this consciously, but over time, their minds began to subconsciously gravitate towards something, anything, that could explain OJ being guilty while still getting acquitted. But again, as I said earlier, this is pure speculation. Whether or not this is the actual historically accurate origin of this urban legend is far from undisputed. However, it is also irrelevant, because while it may be speculation what exactly is the origin of the misconception that the glove was the only significant reason appearing on record for OJ's innocence, it is not speculation that OJ actually had a wealth of evidence in his defense that was not in any way tied to that glove. As such, I hope that everyone can stop accusing OJ of murder, or of manipulating the legal system to get an acquittal he didn't deserve. Because as I have hopefully demonstrated with this video, nothing could be further from the truth. Also, OJ, if you're watching, get in touch with me, because I believe you, even if no one else does. So that's the first edition of Political Conspiracies Debunked. Everyone, let me know in the comments if you think this series has potential to be entertaining and informative. This is Citizens Against Corruption, and I'll see you guys next time.